Today we have the great pleasure of speaking to author Kate Milford. She is the New York Times bestselling author of the Edgar Award-winning National Award book nominee, Greenglass House, as well as Ghosts of Greenglass House, Blue Crown, The Thief Knot, and The Thief Knot, which is all part of the Nagspeak series. She's also the author of the novels The Broken Lands, The Bone Shaker, The Left-Handed Fate, as well as the crowdfunded novella, The Kairos Mechanism, among others. I believe you still have even more than that, right?
There's, yes. I think you've got almost all of them here, but okay. Others forthcoming too.
And she has won or been nominated for a bunch of awards, including the National Book Award nominee for Young People's Literature in 2014, the Cybils Finalists for Speculative Fiction in 2014, the Agatha Awards nominee for Children and Young Adult in 2014, the Dorothy Canfield Fisher Children's Book Award nominee in Children's in 2016, the Edgar Allan Poe Awards winner for Juvenile Fiction in 2015, the Black-Eyed Susan Award nominee for grades 6 through 9 in 2015, the Capital Choices Noteworthy Books for Teens, Children and Teens, I can edit this later, recommended to 10 to 14 in 2015, the Flicker Tale Children's Book Award nominee, and the Pennsylvania Young Readers' Choice Award nominee in 2016. So it's very impressive. She lives with her family in Brooklyn, New York.
Hey.
How are you today, Kate?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you.
All right. And actually, you've been with us before. You were here in 2017 to talk about The Left-Handed Fate. And that interview can actually still be seen on our Japanese YouTube site. This particular interview will be going up on our New York social meeting and our New York site. So today we're talking about the general body of your work, but we want to put a little emphasis on the Greenglass House thread, or as we call it, the Nagspeak world.
Yeah.
And with particular mention of the new, in paperback, Raconteur's Commonplace book. And that's, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Raconteur's? Okay.
Yep.
The Raconteur's Commonplace book is a more recent publication in relation to the other Greenglass House novels, or shall we say the Nagspeak World books, but it appears in other Nagspeak World stories as already fully written, and it's often cited from in detail. Did you write the Raconteur's Commonplace book before any of the other books, or did it suggest itself to you and you just fleshed it out later?
You know what it was? So I've been writing in this world, so they actually there's the books set in Nagspeak, which are like Blue Crown, Greenglass House, Raconteur's, Thief Knot, Ghosts of Greenglass House, and then there's these other two guys. They're actually all sort of interconnected, and they're set in the same broader world. So, and I call it the roaming world, which sort of encompasses all of them. Raconteurs, I had not started writing it when I wrote Greenglass House, but I always really like, one of the things I really like about building worlds is you have to start thinking about things like, you know, if you're writing about a city, obviously you have to know a little bit of the layout, you have to know a little bit of the history of that place. But I think something that makes places feel really real is when you can also think about the folklore, the books that they read, and particularly with folklore, it tells you so much about that world because, and also about the people who are telling it in the story, which is how it gets used in Greenglass House. A character gives Milo this book, and in this book, 15 people are stuck in an inn, and they're stuck there because of floods. So to pass the time, kind of as in Canterbury Tales and the Holly Tree Inn, they share stories. And little by little over the course of it, it starts to become clear that the stories are pieces of a bigger puzzle. And so as people tell their stories, clues that they don't necessarily intend to give away are revealed. And so the stories start to come together. We learn that some people who are there are not who they say they are, and others have met before and are lying about why they're there. And so little by little, the mystery comes clear and the puzzle comes together. In Greenglass House, when a whole bunch of strangers start showing up at Milo's home, which is also an inn, over the holidays, they're also being cagey and not giving much of themselves away. And so someone gives Milo this book, and Milo starts thinking, oh, well, maybe if I get my weirdos talking and sharing stories, they'll give away clues as to why they're there. So when I was writing Greenglass House, because I was already thinking about what sorts of books exist in this world and what might people be reading, that's where I started thinking about this one. But I only wrote like a paragraph here, a paragraph there. So in fact, when it came time to write it, I realized that I had referenced things being out of order for the story that I actually wanted to tell there. Or, I had to adjust some of the paragraphs that I had already written. But the great thing about something that is supposed to be a book of folklore from the city is it made perfect sense that there might be historically different editions of this book. So I just wrote a little author's note saying that I was using a specific order and edition for this when I did it.
Fantastic.
It was something that came up much later. In fact, there's a character in this who is really very closely aligned to the story of Blue Crown and the Kairos mechanism, which you mentioned. There is an antagonist who is the antagonist of all three. And while most of the time we think of, you're following the protagonist, and so a series follows that, this trio follows the antagonist. And so this was meant to be the end of his story, sort of. So there's that too.
Well, you've already actually mentioned Charles Dickens' The Holly Tree and Canterbury Tales. How does this relate? Was this an inspiration for some of this? Or?
Yeah, I like the idea of, part of this is, I guess, maybe growing up on Agatha Christie, but I like the idea of people stuck in a small space and how that affects the story and how that forces people to have to keep bumping into each other and how that can be good for dramatic tension and revealing characters and stuff like that. And Canterbury Tales and Holly Tree Inn are such good examples of that because you have people stuck together, but also it gets at the way that people share stories to pass the time, but also oftentimes as gifts. That's something that traditionally, if you wanted to give a gift, and you could tell a story, and that could be part of what you gave. So I think that's part of why those were inspiration. But also you can tell stories that are connected and share a theme, but that can also be so drastically different, which was really fun for me because the other thing about this one is I got to think about what storytelling means to me and what folklore means to me. And so I got to play around with different types of folklore. So there's a story that's all about riddles. There's a story that is very much a fairy tale. There's one that's a trickster tale. There's one that's an origin story for the city that this all takes place in. So that's another reason I like those kinds of stories, is you have very disparate and diverse storytellers and you can really get at different styles.
Yeah, the character names in your book are unique and evocative to me of a distant time or place, though not so far as to be unrecognizable. They almost seem to have an early American colonial or Eastern Seaboard merchant marine flavor to them. What is the source of some of the names of these characters in your...
They come from all over. I have a really good time with names and naming things in general. I'm trying to think of so what's a good example here? Were there any particular names you were thinking of?
Yeah, actually here, I have some written down. We have Carrie Ving.
Oh.
Georgie Moselle is a little more, Clem Candler is very interesting. Dr. Wilbur Gowerwein.
Oh, all right, so these
Odette
all have
Caraway.
Weird different origins. So Mr. Vinge, I'm trying to remember where De Carey came from, but Vinge was because at the time, I think either my husband or I or both were reading one of Werner Vinge's sci-fi novels, A Deepness in the Sky and A Fire Upon the Deep are the two that we reread. So it was just one of those things where what's around? Vinge, sounds good. And it would work for that character. Gotcha. I can't remember where De Carey came from, but there was a reason for that. But it's been 10 years and it's gone now. Georgie Moselle, many, many years ago, my family went to New Orleans, and there was a place there called the Dead Moselle Cafe. And it was a reference to this picture because a long time ago, when photography was more scarce and something you didn't get access to a lot, there was a thing where if there was a photographer traveling, coming through your town, and a member of your family died, you might make sure that body didn't get buried until you could take a picture with that person. And so the Dead Moselle Cafe is named after a little girl named Moselle, whose funerary picture, but it wasn't meant from a funeral. It was just there was a traveling photographer and came by and they knew this. So that's where Georgie got her last name. Actually, the traveling photographer photographing the dead comes up in Bone Shaker. Because that has never left me. And then Clem where did I get Clem Candler from? I don't know. I have lists of names that I really like.
Deacon and Morvengaard catalog.
Oh, yeah. So this whole city of Nagspeak started because many, many years back, and it was probably 2007, I've always been interested in places as characters, but I was reading a ton of Jeff Vandermeer going way back to like City of Saints and Mad Men, and he had written all of these books set in this city called Ambergris, which was so beautifully rendered, and they're so good. There's like 3 Ambergris novels. I was obsessed with this idea, and I deeply wanted to like play around with it and think about it. My husband had no patience for me. It was not his particular thing. So he's like, how about I build you a website where you can build a town to have as a sandbox and you can play around with this town. And that's where Nagspeak started. So one of the things that, and now I don't remember where Deacon and Morvengaard, the name came from, except I liked it, but they were part of it.
So it's from your imagination, your fertile imagination.
Yes,
okay.
But then there are, Morvengaard shows up here and there, and members of the Deacon family, like people show up here and there,
right.
But and he has a different name that he sometimes uses, or did.
You mentioned that you dreamt up Greenglass House in Nagspeak when you were going through a period of considering adopting a child. Can you tell us more about the inspiration behind that?
Yeah.
Because of the adoption.
So from about, I think I was finishing writing The Broken Lands, and we were trying to, my husband and I had sort of decided to start a family then. We entered the international adoption process at that point. We went all the way through it. In fact, we only withdrew a couple of years ago once COVID kind of hit, a little bit before COVID hit, because the wait times were so far extended that we would still be waiting now. And in the meantime, we did have 2 biological children, so we didn't feel that we could stand in front of people who were, truly still waiting to start their family. But the process of that, you do a lot of research and writing and studying, and you go through a process called the home study process. And one of the things that is discussed many times is that even with a situation like Milo's, where you don't know anything about the birth family, the birth parents are always part of the equation, because every child is different, every family is different, but it's really important to be open to discussions and speculation and allowing the child and the parents to, be allowed to think about this without it feeling like, Milo is afraid, for instance. He has begun really thinking about his birth parents, but is afraid to tell his mom and dad because he thinks that it will make them feel that he doesn't see them as his parents, or is feeling disloyal, or those are the feelings that he has, the fears that cause him to not want to talk about that with his parents. So obviously by the end, some of this is addressed, and Milo's parents make sure to say, you should talk with us about this as often as you want to, and there might be times when you don't want to, but if you do, we want to be part of your wondering, and we want you to know that it is important and valid, and we are here for you and here for these questions. So that's where the character of Milo kind of really came from.
So I'm going to jump down to the inn at Greenglass House has a number of stained glass windows, which are mostly green, but there are some that you clearly describe it. They're not necessarily green. Why was green the predominant choice for the color of the house?
This one, that's interesting. So the other origin of this story was, after writing this, I was part of a critique group, and there were 11 of us writing for different ages, and I had a rough time with Broken Lands, which was really intense and had a lot of research, and it was happening at a point where it was also the first book I had written, I had a contract for before I wrote it. So it was very much like, am I going to be able to do this? Is this story going to work? Making it up as I go along. So after that, I was stressed, and a whole bunch of us were struggling with the projects we were working on for various reasons. So we decided to do a thing where we all put prompts in a hat, and we decided we were going to pull the prompts out and try and write something short and relatively simple. It was supposed to be done over the summer, 200 pages or thereabouts, reasonably simple story. And I pulled out a prompt that said stained glass window. So I failed to answer the prompt by any means other than that. It was like clearly almost twice the length, didn't finish it over the summer, not a very simple story, but I had this question of stained glass windows, and I was thinking about where would these stained glass windows be? And I decided a big old rambly house, because that sounded like a fun thing to write. I thought about where that house would be, and I decided I would write it in Nagspeak. And this was the second book that I had written in Nagspeak, but the first one that I like really worked, that was set there. And once I decided it was set in Nagspeak, then I knew most of the glass would be green, because Nagspeak has this very odd situation with the iron in Nagspeak, which doesn't come into Greenglass House much, but does come into some of the other ones. And because of the iron composition in the sand, I decided it would be green. And so this was something I'd written about on the website. So once I knew that it was stained glass windows in Nagspeak, I thought most of them will be green because of the way their glass is.
Okay.
And then weirdly, the most important windows didn't even come from Nagspeak, they came from somewhere else, which is the story of Blue Crown and how the house was built, but that's neither here nor there.
How deeply, I mean, I get a real sense of a merchant trade or smuggling, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
How deep is that into your folklore of the stories? And is jade or like trade with China also important? Because that seems to also come in a lot.
So there were a couple things, and the first was when I was thinking about Nagspeak for that website. So I grew up on the Chesapeake, and my father was Navy, my grandfather was Navy. We grew up on the water, and so that idea of like a maritime society was always in my head, just something that's like always running in the background. I love boats, I love nautical things, I love little towns by the water. But then also we spent some time in Key West, where I have been told smuggling is still very much part of the economy. But also certainly there were, once I had this catalog empire, Deacon and Morvengaard, that is controlling all of the, or a lot of the buying and selling that's going on, then I knew for sure that smuggling would be absolutely part of the economy, part of the fabric of society, because they're basically, trying to fight against a monopoly. Which then many years later, when I became a bookseller, Deacon and Morvengaard started taking on, other feelings for me. And so that was sort of how smuggling came to be a big thing. But there's a reference in Greenglass House to like certain shades of green ink are illegal and have to come by embargo,
right.
like certain plants, right. Completely arbitrarily. There's a short story about a woman who's in the thief knot when she was a girl, selling lemonade with contraband lemons, which were for like 6 months illegal in Nagspeak. And you could get every other citrus fruit, but you can't get lemons. So it's been a lot of fun to play around with.
Yeah, okay. So again, it's more the mind of Kate Milford than necessarily.
Yeah,
okay.
Because then I like to think about, well, if this is the situation here, how can I take it to the most ridiculous extreme, and what kind of fun could I have with that?
Fantastic. And, yes, so you mentioned that you had been influenced by Agatha Christie, but the puzzles, the detective work, at least in Greenglass House, is quite well worked out, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's very clever. Do you have any other kind of background that helped influence that?
I read The Westing Game obsessively as a kid, and even as an adult. That's another one where there's just like this wonderful puzzle where, and a lot of my young readers will already have heard of The Westing Game, will have maybe read it, but it's absolutely fantastic. And there's a couple kid characters, but also some adult characters, and everyone is offered the opportunity to solve this puzzle and inherit $200 million. But what you find out, minor spoiler, is that everybody has pieces of it. So no one person's set of clues on their own will solve it. And I always loved that book, but I also found it really inspiring when I started writing, because according to Ellen Raskin, the author, her editor in one of the recent editions said like she really made that mostly up as she went along. And then of course had to go back and edit the heck out of it to make it actually make sense. But I always loved that, because I also really like to make things up as I go along and then go back and fix all the, corners I painted myself into. So I loved that one. I'm trying to think if there's, I think it's really just, that's what I love to read, were those kinds of puzzly things. And I think, you know, the things you're reading is, I think, for a writer, such a good education.
I know this is more like folklore, but does it run throughout the other stories?
Yes and no. So these ones are more fantasy adventures. So where the puzzle stuff comes in is where, like, if there was something that I particularly got obsessed with and then decided to fit it in, and it might become a key plot point, but there's less puzzling. Raconteurs, I think, is very much a puzzle. I think it's one of those things where because the actual mystery of the novel does not come clear until you already have a certain number of the pieces, and then you can start to see where things that you've encountered in different stories start to come together. Thief Knot is a little bit puzzly, Ghosts of Greenglass House, because those are sort of all the same kind of, they're sort of the same kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, and here's a fun little tidbit that you may have even forgotten by now, but Greenglass House was optioned by Paramount back in 2015.
Oh yeah.
To be made into a film. Is there still any chance that it could be made into a movie, and how do you feel about it at this point?
Well, so interestingly, Greenglass House has been optioned 3 separate times by 3 different groups. And sometimes you discover that, you know, you don't have the same kind of vision for the book, and that's why it doesn't work out. Sometimes COVID hits, and that's why it doesn't work out. The most recent time, and the company has not announced it, but it has certainly been, it's a thing that has been done, but the most recent group just optioned it in January, was finalized. And a really cool thing about it is they said, yeah, we want to option Greenglass House. And I said, all right, well, so what's your, vision for it? Are you thinking film? Are you thinking TV? Like, tell me all the things that you know you're going to want to change so that we can figure out. Because the nice thing about adaptations when they work is you get all of the benefit of a whole different medium that can tell a story totally differently, can focus on different things, but there are always going to be ways in which it's changed. So I just have learned that I need to be real up front. Like, tell me the things you're going to want to change. Let me tell you the things that I will fight you on. Because I want you to be able to tell this story the best way, but here's a couple rivers I don't want to cross. So the most recent group, they're like, tell me what your vision is. And they're like, honestly, we won't know until we have read everything in this world and we know it as well as you do. And I thought, oh, that's exciting, because I feel like this is a place where you could start off with the cozy mystery, and then if you eventually want the Carnegie books and you want to have some horror, you can do it. You could have so I said, well, that sounds really exciting. And then I told my film agent, and she's like, okay, so we'll look for that. And when they sent the offer in, it was for everything. And all of this stuff, plus weird little short stories that I've written for like letterboxes that are hidden around, and like random art that I did. We need absolutely everything. And then we'll figure out how we start building a cinematic universe from it. And so that's the current situation. And I feel really optimistic because we just finished 2 big strikes, a writer's strike and, SAG-AFTRA. So that would have been a perfect time for someone to say, this has been really hard for everyone. We have to make some choices. So we're going to end the option and walk away. But no, I got an email from the producer who's like, pencils up, let's go. Wow. So nothing is for sure yet, but they're still plowing forward. And, I got to say hi to them just a couple weeks ago, and I feel really optimistic. So I celebrate every step. So I'm very excited about it. And so yes, there is
we
hope.
hope something comes from that, definitely.
I really like the story discussions we've had, and they have brought me out for a lot of story discussions and have felt very open to, like, I was thinking about this. How would you feel if we add this element or change this element? And I think the places where they have, first of all, that they came to me at all to discuss those things is awesome. But also I like the energy and the thinking. So I have high hopes.
So are they going to do it as an individual book, or are they going to kind of combine everything and then mishmash?
This is where we won't know, I think, until it happens. But there is a plan that, and it's all like speculation, but it could be like a season of TV interspersed with a movie to another season of TV interspersed with another movie, and maybe this guy is like an animated anthology kind of thing, and then we go back for season 3 and spin off the, so like they're thinking big, but then they also have to figure out how they can sell this and how it makes sense to do it. So
it's great,
yeah.
Guys. You should really do it. You had one question I wanted to ask you. The Greenglass House, the Nag Speak books are kind of, as you call, a cozy universe. But you said you actually enjoyed writing more like the Bone Shaker and the Broken Lands books.
I love these.
And is there any particular? Are these more scary, more horror? What is it about them you like more?
It's not that I like them more, but I like being able to do. I like being able to do different types of storytelling. So these are very much about. So they're still in the same world, but. These are set in crossroads towns, and the idea is in this world, a crossroads is a place of great power because, among other things, a crossroads is a place where you make a choice. And so whatever else happens there's power in making a choice and there's peril in making a choice. And so there is a character named Jack. There's a couple big like overarching pieces of folklore, and in Greenglass House you meet Julian, who there's a story about a character named Julian Romer, and he is sort of like one axis along which the folklore of this world goes. And then there's a character named Jack who beat the devil so badly the devil wouldn't let him in when it was time for the end of his life, but the devil gave him the coal of hellfire and said, go out and start your own place, which is not a story I made up, obviously. And nor did I make up the character of Jack. The character of Jack is a character who wanders through folklore as a trickster. In American folklore, in European folklore, he's all over the place. So Jack walking through this world looking for a place to start his own personal hell is kind of the other axis. So like for the cozy stories, we're following Julian a little bit, and for the carnagey ones, we're following Jack as he goes to these different places looking for a crossroads that can be the centerpiece of this place where he decides to start it. And the Bone Shaker is kind of my Ray Bradbury homage, a little bit Something Wicked This Way Comes. It's set in 1914 in a crossroads town in Missouri, and Jack is wandering through looking for a place. He is not the primary antagonist, but he's there. And then Broken Lands is my Brooklyn story, because Brooklyn in 1877 was a different city from Manhattan, and so they were building the Brooklyn Bridge. But that bridge plus the river would have made for a very powerful crossroads. So this is an instance in which Jack does try to take the cities, and then two kids, Sam and Jean, stand up and save the world basically. So I do like the big, like earth-shattering, world-ending, like the universe hangs in the balance kind of stakes. And I like scary. I also loved reading horror as a kid. I love Ray Bradbury. I love thinking about that kind of stuff, and scary folklore is fun too. So it's fun to have, like, to be able to do the full range.
Great. So one final question before I ask you to do a pitch. If you can think about one
Sure.
that you'd like to do a pitch for everybody.
Oh, okay.
Do you have anything upcoming? Do you have any projects in the works right now that we should know about?
I do. I have two things upcoming, and the first is the next book in this world is a book called Rialto, which is set in a town where there is an abandoned theme park, and some kids who come to town, two sisters, one of whom is struggling with some anxiety and depression, which is a thing I do myself, and her older sister who's trying to figure out how to be a big sister to her younger sister. I'm also an older sister. So that one felt very personal to sort of write about these things, but it's also a fantasy, and of course this park is a character, and they discover that there is a mystery and a reason the park shut down, but the park maybe doesn't want to stay shut down. So that's Rialto, and that comes out in spring or summer 2025. And then I have my first graphic novel series with Lucy Bellwood, and she is an adventure cartoonist with expertise in tall ships, and we decided to write a book about pirate capybaras. So if you know what capybara is, it's like this big adorable rodent that like doesn't synthesize vitamin C though. So just like people, it would get scurvy if it went to sea and didn't have lots of green stuff. So my capybaras are pirates, and there's a little badger named Monty who wants to go to sea, and he winds up getting aboard this ship, but then discovers belatedly that it's a pirate ship. So he has to figure out, like, can pirates be honorable? And the captain has two first mates who are of the same seniority. One is all pirate all the time, but one came from the Navy, and they switch off every hour who's actually second in command and like in charge. So the person who keeps track of which one of them is in charge at any given time is a little capybara, Monty's friend, named Lettuce, and Lettuce has this big hourglass. So Lettuce is actually the most powerful person on the ship because she can decide, are we going to be strategic or are we going to blow some stuff up, kind of. So those also, the first one comes out in spring 2025, I think.
Right.
Oh, we're going to close.
Okay, so choosing one of the books here,
All right.
can you give it a good elevator pitch?
Yeah.
You can ham it up.
I'm going to stick with Raconteurs
Sure.
because it is my baby and it also just came out in glorious paperback. So you can now have the fancy keep it for yourself forever and read it a million times edition or the one that fits in your pocket. But this story is part of the world, but it stands alone. And so it's a great way to see what the world is all about. It's a collection of short stories of all different kinds of folklore. So if you like fantasy, there's going to be something in here for you. And then there's a framing narrative. So there is a mystery to solve in this book as the characters who are telling these stories and hearing them begin to realize that something very strange is happening in this inn. Some of these people have ulterior motives and are there for various reasons. But I also really like it because some of the stories are short, some are long, some are hopeful, some are scary. There's a little of everything. And in particular for teachers or parents, you can take one out and it makes a great read aloud in class. And I think also it's a really fun book for thinking about storytelling and what it means to tell a story and share a story, what stories are for and what they can do. And so that's my favorite. That's why.
Great. And thanks for joining us today, Kate. We really enjoyed your deeply imaginative worlds and setups, and we hope to see a lot more in the future. And we hope to see you on the big screen as well. Kate Milford is the author of, among others, Greenglass House, the Raconteur's Commonplace book, and the other Nagspeak world-centered books published by Clarion Books, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, and are, along with Bone Shaker and the Broken Lands, available now at Kinokuniya. Look for the link in the description box below to get your own copy. And signed copies will be available, but only while supplies last.